The church, a house of God, a place of saints, of worship, of light. But look closer, and you'll see a face. Not of Christ, not a saint, but a man made of leaves. His eyes stare wide, his mouth spews vines, and he is everywhere. Carved into roof beams, crouched above pews, grinning from the stone. But who is he, and why is he hiding in our churches? Welcome back, Darklings. You've seen the angels and the crosses, but did you ever notice the face hidden in the foliage? These leafy faces began appearing in churches from the 11th century onwards, sometimes Romanesque and fierce, sometimes Gothic and grimacing, but always the same haunting image, a human face entwined with leaves, sprouting from its mouth, nostrils, even its eyes. By the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries, they were everywhere, staring down from ceiling arches, peering out from choir stalls, wedged between saints and angels, hidden in places you'd never expect to find them. But mysteriously, they were never spoken of. There's no mention in any church or historical record to explain their meaning. For centuries, these faces were simply there, silent, watching. They didn't even have a name until 1939, when a woman looked up and saw something ancient staring back. Her name was Lady Julia Raglan, and in her now famous article in the journal Folklore, she gave him the name we still use today, the Green Man. And with that name, she gave us a mystery. Raglan proposed that this leafy figure wasn't Christian at all, but a memory of a pagan god of fertility, nature, and rebirth. Drawing on the work of Sir James Fraser, Raglan linked the Green Man to a long line of vegetation deities, gods who die and return with the seasons. She believed the Green Man had survived not just in stone, but in the folk traditions still alive today. Spring festivals like May Day, garlanding, and Jack in the Green. In these leafy celebrations, she saw the same figure, a man dressed in foliage, paraded through town, honoured as the living spirit of the season. And when you see him, covered in vines, crowned with leaves, dancing through the streets, it's easy to believe she might be right. Each spring, in scattered corners of Britain, the Green Man comes alive. Every May Day in Hastings, crowds flock to join in a raucous procession through the streets. A towering Jack-in-the-Green figure leads the way, a man completely encased in greenery, followed by drummers, dancers, and costumed characters. There's singing, drinking, maypole dancing, and finally, Jack is led to a hilltop, where he is ritually stripped of his foliage, to symbolically release the spirit of summer. In Castleton, Derbyshire, a man becomes the Garland King. He's placed on horseback, cloaked in a huge bell-shaped frame of leaves and flowers. He parades solemnly through the village with a lady beside him, and at the end of the day, the garland is hoisted up the church tower. And in Edinburgh, at the Beltane Fire Festival held on Calton Hill, the Green Man takes centre stage. His body is painted vivid green, his head crowned with leaves, a living spirit of the wild. He dances through fire alongside the May Queen in a dramatic ritual that ends with his symbolic death and rebirth. All across the UK, springtime summons figures of green, half man, half vegetation, dancing through village lanes and city streets, before being ritually stripped once more to awaken the summer. Lady Raglan believed these leafy figures were echoes of something ancient, the very same spirit we see carved into church stone, but there's just one problem. The festival characters she pointed to, Jack in the Green, the Garland King, don't appear in written records until centuries after the Green Man began appearing in churches. The earliest known mention of Jack in the Green comes from 1770, in a report by a visiting Frenchman who described a strange May Day procession in London, led by a man entirely shrouded in foliage. But in earlier accounts, he's curiously absent. When Samuel Pepys described a London May Day parade in 1667, he noted how milkmaids carried garlands upon their pails, but made no mention of any leaf-covered figure. So while May Day and Beltane themselves are much older, there's no trace of any leaf-covered figure, no Green Man, until that 18th century sighting. Historians argue that while these customs feel ancient, the evidence just isn't there, at least not in the way Lady Raglan imagined. Some even suggest Jack in the Green was a later invention, a product of Victorian romanticism and a growing obsession with Britain's pagan past. But just because something wasn't written down, does that mean it didn't exist? For most of history, the traditions of ordinary people weren't recorded. They simply weren't seen as important enough. In many rural communities, festivals and folklore were passed down orally, via word of mouth, generation to generation, without ever being written down. The debate is far from over, but for now, the hard evidence is lacking. So, if these festival figures aren't the origin, and there's no record to explain the carvings, then who, or what, is the Green Man? If he isn't born from May Day parades, and no Christian text explains him, then we're left with a deeper mystery. Where did he come from? Because although the Green Man seems most at home in medieval English churches, he's been found in places far older and far stranger. In France, a 4th century tomb shows a man with leaves pouring from his mouth. In Germany, Roman sarcophagi bear foliate faces, human features tangled with vines. And in the ruined city of Hatra in modern-day Iraq, a stone face from the 2nd century stares out, its mouth overflowing with leaves. Across Roman villas and ancient temples, from Western Europe to the Near East, the leafy face appears again and again. Long before he was ever named, the Green Man was watching. And yet, no one left us an explanation, no written record, no official meaning. It's possible people once recognized him instantly, a symbol so familiar it needed no words. Or maybe he was already ancient, his meaning already forgotten in antiquity. But since Lady Raglan's study, more theories have emerged, each offering a different glimpse of who he might have been. Some look to symbolism, some to secret messages carved in stone, others turn to mythology. And it's tempting to see him as an echo of the old gods, spirits of growth, wildness, and eternal return. Like the Celtic Cernunnos, often called the Horned God or Lord of the Wild, linked to animals, the forest, fertility, and the underworld. Or Oceanus, the Roman sea god, crowned with seaweed and flanked by sea creatures. Or Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and ecstasy, crowned with ivy, draped in vines, a god of both abundance and madness. Even Osiris of Egypt was green-skinned, the colour of vegetation, a god of resurrection, the afterlife, and the annual rising of crops. Depictions of these ancient deities, and others, bear a striking resemblance to the Green Man. Could he be a Christian appropriation of the old gods of fertility and rebirth? Across Europe, the early church often absorbed local beliefs, allowing familiar symbols to take on new meanings within a Christian frame. Some theorists suggest the Green Man is a similar case, a pagan memory, smuggled into Christian art. But not every leafy face smiles with divine grace. Some snarl, others grimace, and in their twisted mouths and tangled hair we glimpse something darker, the wild man. A figure of myth and madness, the wild man haunts the edges of medieval art and legend. Hairy, untamed, and often naked, he's not quite beast, not quite man, a creature transformed by the wilderness. You'll find him carved high in the rafters, tucked beneath the seats or lurking along stone pillars. And tellingly, the Green Man often appears in those very same places. In some churches, you'll even find both. A snarling wild man and a grimacing green man wreathed in vines placed side by side. Perhaps medieval artists saw a connection between the two. Perhaps they are different masks for the same entity. The Old English word Wodwose, meaning wild man of the woods, shows up in the 1380s Wycliffe Bible, describing demon-like figures who haunt desolate places. And just a few decades later, in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the hero rides into a strange, ancient forest said to be prowled by Wodwose, wild, inhuman creatures that blur the line between man and nature. The Green Knight himself is described as green-skinned, enormous and powerful. Scholars like Charles Little and William Anderson suggest he may be a fusion, a meeting of green man and wild man traditions, stitched together in one haunting figure. But the wild man is far older than medieval poetry. His roots reach back into Babylon, Rome, even Mesopotamia. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, we meet Enkidu, a wild man raised by animals, covered in hair. He must be tamed before he can join society and unlock his wisdom. In the book of Daniel, the proud king Nebuchadnezzar is driven mad by God. His hair grows wild, his nails become claws, until he is little more than a beast in the field. In ancient tales, shepherds try to capture the wild man. By tying him up, they hope he'll reveal sacred secrets in exchange for his freedom. Even Merlin, in his earliest Welsh form, was once a wild man. Not a wizard in robes, but Merlin Weitht, a warrior broken by grief, who fled into the woods to live like an animal. There, in solitude and madness, he gained the gift of prophecy. And that's the thread that winds through every tale of the wild man, a link between wildness and wisdom. He must be captured to give up his secrets, or tamed before he sees clearly. And perhaps that's why this face appears in our churches. The wild man among the saints may whisper a quiet truth, that knowledge does not come to the untamed, that obedience is the path to wisdom. But there's another possibility, and this is where things get a little strange. Some art historians argue the green man is just a flourish, a decorative tradition passed down through generations of craftsmen. But in medieval times, church sculptors weren't just artisans. They were members of powerful guilds, tightly organised, highly skilled, and shrouded in secrecy. Masons had to master geometry, engineering, and religious iconography. And that knowledge, largely inaccessible to ordinary people, gave them a special kind of authority. They developed secret marks to identify each other's work, and some believe these guilds preserved fragments of ancient wisdom hidden in plain sight through their carvings. This has led some scholars to suggest the green man was part of a guild tradition. In this reading, it might have been a simple test of skill, a carving to showcase their craftsmanship, or a symbolic motif whose true meaning was known only to guild members. There's no direct evidence, but the silence itself is telling. The green man appears again and again across Europe, and yet not a single historical document explains his presence. In a world of secret brotherhoods and veiled messages, that silence might not be accidental. Others believe the green man served a protective role, like gargoyles perched on the roof to scare away demons, or a symbol of nature's power standing watch over sacred spaces. But there's another possibility, one that reaches far beyond Europe. In temples across India, Indonesia, and Nepal, you'll find a very familiar face, a fierce fanged creature, disgorging leaves, vines, and floral patterns. He is called Kīrtimukha, the face of glory, a guardian spirit, a symbol of divine life force, placed above sacred doors to ward off evil. The resemblance is striking, and perhaps not coincidence. Some scholars propose that the green man may have been inspired by these Eastern images, travelling along trade routes or through crusader contact. They were copied into manuscripts which subsequently inspired stonemasons as they searched for visual references for their carvings. But the green man turns up somewhere even more unexpected, not in a forest, not in a church, but in the notebooks of alchemists. In the Renaissance, alchemy wasn't just about turning lead into gold, it was about transforming the self. Alchemists believed that just as trees grow new leaves each spring, a person could grow a new self, shedding bad habits, selfishness or ignorance, and becoming wiser, calmer, more connected to the divine. Some even called this the greening of the soul. And in their books and woodcuts, we start to see something familiar. Faces peering out from leaves, bodies merging with vines and flowers. These leafy figures weren't just decoration, they were symbols of personal transformation. One of the most famous images is the green lion, shown devouring the sun. It represents nature's power to consume and begin again. It's not a green man exactly, but some versions look strikingly similar. A leafy mane, a fierce expression, a wild, consuming energy. And then there's the philosopher's garden, a term alchemists used for the inner world of the soul. They imagined it like a hidden garden inside each person, a place where thoughts, beliefs, and intentions had to be carefully tended. If you neglected it, weeds took over. But if you cultivated it, through study, self-discipline, and spiritual insight, it would flourish. In this reading, the Green Man isn't just a face in the forest. He's a symbol of the self, transformed. But even transformation has its limits, because the leaves that bud will one day fall. And perhaps that's the final message behind the Green Man's silent gaze, a memento mori, a reminder that all flesh returns to the earth. His face, tangled in leaves, warns us that nature will one day reclaim our bodies. But from decay comes new life. Death is not the end, but part of the divine cycle. So what do you see in this silent, leafy face? A forgotten god, a hidden message from the Masons, or a mirror reflecting something inside us all? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten folklore, don't miss the chilling tale behind the magpie rhyme One for Sorrow, a warning wrapped in verse, and perhaps something darker beneath. See you in a future video.